The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Today's episode is Skepticism and Sources of Information.
Hey everyone, it's Wade Franson. I'm back in the studio to record the sneak peek for this Sunday morning's 7 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, Created in the Image of God show with a returning guest who's focused on what the Bahá'í Writings say about independent investigation of truth and how we should approach the media. And Mehrtash Olson is his name, and he's given lectures now and presentations within the Baha'i community to groups of scholars for Baha'i studies and so on. So welcome back to the studio, Mehrtash.
Hi, Wade. Thanks for having me.
And it's a pleasure to have you. Boy, have things changed in the media landscape in the last couple of months since we talked to you. Your work seems more relevant than ever. Are you getting that sense yourself of how important it is, what you've been focusing on and what you're unpacking here?
I would agree with that. I feel like it's so important for people to understand that there are all sorts of filters applied to the information that we receive, and that it's very important for us to seek out independent sources of information that can give us a more accurate picture of facts as they play out across the world, and to understand that there are powerful vested interests that put information in front of us. They're willing to bear the cost of that because they understand that they are creating a certain vision of the world, a certain interpretation of current events that benefits them. And we should understand that sometimes there's quite a gap between that and reality.
Well, in the Baha'i faith, for those who don't know, in this sneak peek, as we send it out to make people aware of this show and get them to tune in, is the most recent, you might say, Abrahamic religion, right? Tracing its roots back to Abraham, just like the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims. But with the additional recognition of not only are we one family in Abraham, that prophet founder who was told by God, I will make you the father of many nations. And implicit in that was also many religions. But what's unique is that the Baha'is also have a theology that allows them to embrace Hinduism and Buddhism and recognize that all these messengers are from God, and that this is just the latest in a long line of messengers bringing an update, a reboot, a new software upgrade to the theological and the spiritual understanding of our species, the medicine for this day. And in that context, this second hidden word of Bahá'u'lláh that says, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice, and focus on it so that I may confide in you, so that through its aid you shall see with thine own eyes and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. To me, I don't know if you see that as really a focal point of your work, but the independent investigation of reality, training us to have the ability to sort through the biases and the noise and the appeal of whatever it is they're trying to sell us, so that we cannot be bought and sold by media or the opinions or the ideologies of others, but that we can become independent citizens with the ability to discern good and evil, as Paul said, having exercised our senses to discern good and evil for ourselves. with the aid of the Holy Spirit. Do you see your work in that light? And what are some elements of your work that people can learn when they tune in this coming Sunday morning?
That's right. Abdu'l-Bahá talks about how important it is for us to comprehend with our own mind, that we're all given this individual endowment and capacity so that we may pursue reality and not to rely on hearsay or the opinions or the perspective of others. And so that's exactly what I'm trying to do with regard to sources of information. You know, a lot of people turn to platforms like, say, Google, and it's got a lot of subsidiary elements there. You know, you have Google Maps and YouTube, and you know, its search function, Google Search, and so many different things wrapped up under that umbrella. And we've come to kind of accept that in our lives, and sometimes we can turn to those search results and think we're getting just unvarnished fact. And it's important to know that other people have looked into it. And I'll just read you a quotation from Nafiz Ahmed, who is an investigative journalist, who says the following: "The United States intelligence community funded, nurtured, and incubated Google as part of a drive to dominate the world through control of information. Seed funded by the National Security Agency and CIA, Google was merely the first among a plethora of private sector startups co-opted by US intelligence to retain information superiority." We can go into it further, but that's a perspective that the average American internet user wouldn't really have, just thinking about getting search results from the Google search engine. But if you look into, you know, the investigations of Dr. Robert Epstein, you'll see that there is lots of behind the scenes curation that goes on with algorithms and and with censorship and with providing you information that vested interests want you to see, and hiding other things that they don't want you to see. It's important to understand that all around us, so many of our experiences with popular media are curated in that fashion.
Well, thank you, Mehrtash. We're going to end this sneak peek there, although I've just decided we're going to actually use the sneak peek as the first segment of the show. So for those of you tuning into the sneak peek, be here next Sunday. For those of you who are seeing this sneak peek as the first segment of our Sunday morning show, stay tuned. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
What do ancient prophecies, the collapse of empires, and the Beatles have in common? In the people of the sign, truth is revealed to be far stranger than fiction. Wade Franson weaves together a childhood torn apart, world-shifting events in the music of a generation, on a journey that's as personal as it is historic. In the hardness of the heart, the quest deepens. Faith and doubt collide. Through shattering setbacks and unexpected miracles, Wade invites you to question, to seek, to forgive, and ultimately discover what truly matters. This is a story of reconciliation, resilience, and a universal longing to understand the mystery of God. Then, in The Rod of Iron, the relentless search for coherence comes to a breathtaking conclusion. From the Tower of Babel to science's furthest frontiers, Wade connects the mysteries of the past to the unity of a possible future, and to the deepest longings of the human soul. Wade Franson's trilogy is a riveting odyssey, exploring faith, science, forgiveness, and the music that ties it all together. Discover the story where every puzzle leads to a greater truth. Start your journey today.
Welcome back to Created in the Image of God. I'm here with Mehrtash Olson. Just before the commercial break in our sneak peek, which was reshown now, I'm a prophet, I'm predicting the future. You were talking about how Google came to be. Unpack that a little bit for us. And by the way, for the audience, conspiracy theories are often early understanding of what tomorrow we will accept to be true, right? But also sometimes they're not. right? So I don't like to sort of go deep into conspiratorial theories before we have more knowledge and full knowledge. So I want you to unpack this, but I want to share my perspective before we do, which is I believe Google overall was a good thing. I believe the compiling and sharing of information, I believe AI is generally a good thing, that we can use it as a tool to get the information we need to fulfill that second hidden word of independently investigating the truth, the reality, and the availability of information is critical, right? Because, you know, information is power, and people throughout history have controlled information and not released it. We have the opposite problem today. We have information overload, and we have spin, and we have misinformation. Our problem is not a lack of information. Our problem is too much information, and information that is unreliable, and we have to learn how to discern, right? So the analogy is, we must all become carpenters, workmen who know how to use our tools. And if you know how to use a hammer, when you have the nail gun of Google, or the, you know, automated strategic, you know, steroid and turbocharged nail gun of AI, you better know how to use it. Don't give it to a child who doesn't know how to use a hammer, right? You can hurt your fingers with a hammer. You can hit yourself in the nail, or somebody else with a nail gun. So my premise is, even if the original seeding of it came from some of those sources, doesn't mean it's a horrible tool that we should never use. But I'm sure the point you're going to make is to be careful, because imagine how it might be used by those who have some control over it. Anyway, back over to you. I wanted to sort of caveat it with that. And let me know if you agree.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. You know, it's something that the average user, you know, would probably, it would escape us.
Right.
But Dr. Robert Epstein, who is the former editor-in-chief of Psychology Today, a publication, and he is currently the senior research psychologist at the American Institute of Behavioral Research and Technology. He's looked closely at Google, and he points out a couple of things. He says that, you know, due to its kind of dominance in the market for the past 20 years, owing to the tremendous success of Google search and the ad model that they use with that, and how that's made them a lot of money, they've been able to behave almost like a monopoly. And there's problems with that. You know, Lord Acton said, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think three issues with Google that I'll mention that are presented by Dr. Epstein are: the first problem is surveillance. That, you know, in the business model of Alphabet Google, you know, your internet related behavior is tracked, and the resulting information is packaged, it's saved, it's sold to third parties, to other companies, and thus, in a sense, users become products that are sold to vendors, and that's not something the average user really thinks about when they're going to interact with the product. There's more to that, but I'll just jump on to, you know, the second problem being censorship. That, you know, often when we turn to a utility like that, we're trying to gain information, we're trying to gain facts, we're trying to gain truth. And this is not always the case with Google. You know, Google's, you know, trust and safety team is managed by 3 former CIA agents. I say former in air quotes. In fact, there's hundreds of employees, Dr. Epstein points out, and Glenn Greenwald, investigative reporter, points out that hundreds and hundreds of former intelligence, you know, CIA agents, agents are now in positions there of authority. And this, you often wonder, you know, I thought this was a search engine. I thought this was, you know, giving me access to information. And, you know, why is it that there's, you know, so many former spies working, for Google.
Well, and allow me here just to interject.
Sure.
For those who may not know this, because I worked in technology, and because I speak multiple languages and worked in Europe, especially in the actually behind the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union, having studied Russian and Germany, the CIA has twice targeted me for recruitment. And the way that they work is you would then be a CIA agent working within one of these tech companies, gathering intelligence for the government. Oh, wow. So this is very real, and they are, constantly reaching out to even, peons like me to try to recruit people who can help. And anyway, go ahead.
Oh, it's fascinating. I didn't know that personal tidbit about you. And then there's a third problem that Dr. Epstein points out, which is manipulation. That users like me who just get on to one of the Google products, wanting to search something, we don't understand that there's an element of manipulation there. That, let's say based on my previous YouTube track record, maybe up to 70% of the YouTube search result or feed that I'm getting is based on my prior interaction with it, which may, and other things that they might know about me, which might hinder, the information I'm trying to actually reach and pull up. That, Google has used its power, with regard to manipulation, with regard to censorship, and so on, and what it knows about the user to give them a false impression of important things. For instance, I'll just mention a couple of political folks that people are well familiar with, which is Warren, Senator Warren from Massachusetts, and Bobby Kennedy Jr., who's currently serving in the Trump administration. The two of them, were is an example of two folks that people might see as not exactly aligned politically, but they were both targeted by Google for different reasons. Elizabeth Warren, because she called for the breakup of Alphabet, the parent company of Google, into its constituent parts to kind of try to get it to minimize monopolistic behavior. Well, soon after that, Google started directing its users, and any user that was trying to, let's say, get information about Senator Warren, or anybody that might be considered a constituent, meaning, let's say, from state of Massachusetts, and liberal or left-leaning or Democratic Party aligned, which is a lot of, this information is available to Google through your account, through what you've liked, what you've subscribed to, what you've watched, what you might say in your bio. And what they did was they would direct those users to false extreme right portrayals of Senator Warren, which trying to give them the wrong impression of her, to make her less popular among her natural constituency. I suppose with the thought that she would not get as much support when it's time to vote, and then maybe she would not get reelected. And then if she was not reelected, she would be less of a thorn in the side of Google in terms of talking about trying to break them up for monopolistic reasons.
Well, I can imagine that backfiring in the same way that all the negative information about our current president led to his base just being all the more rabidly pro, right? So if you start directing Elizabeth Warren's base towards extreme views from her opponents, it actually just fires up the base to be even more supportive. But
yeah.
And I want to add here, because I'm skeptical too. It's interesting to me that some of this stuff is coming up now, because I'm hearing things about the current administration being fascist, related to Jimmy Kimmel and whatnot. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that this stuff is coming up now, when in fact, while previous administration was in office, none of this information was coming out. But the previous administrations were obviously benefiting from all of these things being in place, and the news around Twitter, which has been out now for several years, the news about Google, which is coming out in the last few days. shows how previous administrations used and exploited this, even in the 2020 election, dramatically doing exactly what you're describing about Elizabeth Warren, to make sure that Democrats were encouraged to vote and Republicans were not encouraged to vote in the 2020 election. That information is also out there. So I'm not picking a side here. I'm just saying, in everything, we have to recognize that political partisanship is at play. We have to be aware of it. We have to not be, captured by it and influenced by it. We must see things with our own eyes. And the work you're doing, I believe, is helping make us aware and filter through that. But anyway, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to add some context.
That's exactly right. I think they also, targeted Bobby Kennedy Jr. Because he, when he was running for president to try to get the Democratic ticket against Joe Biden last year, he mentioned that when he got into the White House, he would put an end to pharmaceutical ads, and that kind of the ad revenue that Google relies on, the Alphabet relies on for its wealth generation, was at risk. And I think for that reason, because he was a potential threat, they also kind of targeted him with kind of ads that paint him as, kind of smear him and paint him as an extremist of whatever sort.
Well, and by way of peeling back the onion on that, I think it's important for the audience to know this. If you watch any kind of media, especially TV, we sometimes watch Netflix or Amazon Prime, and there are ads on Amazon Prime and other TV shows, tons and tons of ads for drugs, right? From the pharmaceutical, every kind of drug. They now have ads for drugs that are designed to treat the side effects of other drugs. And it's amazing. And you wonder, how on earth, why are they spending all this money on advertising? Well, there are two reasons. It's not the reason that has always been the case. They're not actually trying to get you to buy that drug or even ask your doctor for that drug. They're saying, ask your doctor for this drug. They're not expecting the patient to go in and ask the doctor for the drug. That's not why they're doing the advertising. They're doing the advertising for two reasons. One is it's a legitimate bribery scheme, right? By giving all these millions and millions of dollars of advertising money to these media networks, the media networks are beholden to them. The media networks are then incentive. There's an incentive structure in place to not release negative information about that drug, to continue the whole lobbying industry around preventing you from understanding how serious those side effects are. If you have suicidal thoughts, nausea and vomiting, all the millions of things that how this drug is going to kill you and cause you all these problems, the media that's receiving all this advertising money won't share that information with you. So it's not about getting you to be a customer. It's about controlling the media. The second thing is CYA. If they're ever hauled in front of a court of the land, they can say, Your Honor, we spent millions, and here's the receipts of the millions of dollars we spent telling the customers about the side effects. We did everything we could have and should have and more to inform our customers about the side effects. Of course, the customers have no control because the pharmaceutical industry has the doctors and the clinics and the hospitals under their control, and they're shoving the drugs down your throat, whether you're aware of the side effects or not. And you're just going along with it. So understand that's what's going on with all this money in the pharmaceutical area. And if you're not aware of that, you're watching these ads and you're like, this is stupid. Haha, they're wasting their money. I'm not going to want to ask for that drug. Well, that's not what it's about anyway.
Wow. Well, these are things that we're getting quite an education about just in recent years, I think. And another thing that's related, I'll say, is, when you look at Facebook, again, people often turn to that to catch up with friends or share information about their family or entertainment, watching a video or something, and don't realize that in 2012, Facebook published an article in the Nature Journal describing how it sent go vote reminders to about 60 million Facebook users on election day back in the 2010 midterm elections. And Facebook calculated that reminder effort, that go vote encouragement that it put out, it motivated about 340,000 people to go vote on that particular day. And so,
and they got in trouble, didn't they? Because this was an illegal campaign contribution because they were doing it. And there were lawsuits in which Facebook was had to like buy their way out of these lawsuits.
That's right. There was that, if you remember that Cambridge Analytica scandal, that British political consulting firm, that I think around 2018 we learned that that Cambridge Analytica had paid Facebook for user data for tens of millions of profiles back in 2014, which it used to tailor political campaigns for certain politicians. And so, that's, I remember years ago just hearing that phrase, hearing the name of that consulting firm and understanding that was in the news, but not really looking into it and understanding what it was about. And so it's been kind of revelatory for me now in researching this to go back and look and see what was actually happening. And to understand how much kind of behind the scenes manipulation, curation, there is, and how many users may be not aware of that. And so I mention all of this just to say, if we approach things like Facebook and Google as just neutral tools, we will open ourselves up to a lot more manipulation than if we understand that we're engaging with something that probably has its own, hidden agenda. And so, we should check a couple of different sources and just, be aware of the extent to which popular media, internet platforms are attempting to get us to think in a certain way, to see some kinds of information and then not to see other important information that is kind of, paid to be hidden, let's say. Independent investigative journalist Cheryl Atkinson basically said in her dealings with, top level folks in the government and corporations that, so much of what we see, it was admitted to her, has been put there by powerful interests that paid a lot of money to do so. And we should be aware of that.
Yep. I think that's a good point to go to a commercial break. We'll be right back with more of Mehrtash Olson and the independent investigation of truth and reality. Don't go anywhere.
Discover the world's religious traditions like never before with Ocean 2.0 Reader. Our custom ebook reader is designed for exploration and study with an immersive audio integrated reading experience and powerful research tools available on all platforms including web, Windows, macOS, Linux, Android, and iOS. Experience the benefits of immersive reading by combining ear and eye with improved comprehension and vocabulary acquisition. Our interfaith library features books from various religions, so you can have access to a wealth of knowledge. Try Ocean 2.0 Reader today and elevate your reading experience.
Welcome back to Baha'i researcher Mehrtash Olson on Created in the Image of God. We're talking about media, information control, what's behind today's media and social media. And we were just talking about incentive structures, right? Where the money comes from. You've heard the phrase follow the science. I saw a meme, which I love, which says, they told me to follow the science. I followed the money and I found the science. And so it's really important to understand incentive structures. What goes by the name of science today is often not science at all, really. It's research and development. In that sense, it has a scientific basis, but it's funded research and development that produces a narrative under the banner of science. right? And nowhere is this more true than in the pharmacological industry, the medical industrial complex. You know, healthcare is big business, and we are approached through our heart, right? We want to ease pain, we want to ease suffering. The opioid crisis was developed on the back of changing medical treatment away from treating a disease and classifying pain as a disease. And once they put that chart up on the wall of the smiley face and the frowny face and 10 stages, and you walked in and they said, "How's your pain today on a scale of 1 to 10?" And if you said that your pain was 6 or above, you could get prescribed an opioid, right? A narcotic. You didn't have to go to an illegal source. You didn't have to go to your drug pusher anymore in some back alley to get your opium. You could go to your doctor and tell him you're in pain, and your doctor would give you the drug. And it was all funded by insurance and sales teams. There are several great documentaries that describe exactly how this happened. So on the back of alleviating suffering, the entire American population went along with turning doctors into drug dealers and drug pushers of addictive substances. And millions of Americans died as a result of making illegal drugs legal and even encouraging their use for anyone who had any kind of pain or claimed to have any kind of pain. This is but one of many, many examples I could bring. So especially for our Baha'i friends, don't be fooled by the term science. Don't be fooled by it. Don't go along with those who use the label science denier to sideline and cancel anyone who says, wait a minute, I'm not so sure this is really scientific. I'm just giving you one extreme example, but this applies to many, many areas. Independently investigate the truth through the light of the Holy Spirit and through the Word of God. The Word of God often is in direct contradiction to so-called social science in particular. Any kind of social science is often advocating things that go against the law of God and the Word of God. That should be a huge warning sign. It's human behavior that violates the commandments of God. Don't be fooled by so-called science. I just wanted to put that out there. Now back to you, Mehrtash, about how to go through and discover, information and how to sort through it in this context.
I think, there's a couple of Baha'i quotations that I think of in terms of the news. And it's just interesting to reflect on, because just to look at it in contrast to what we're looking at today. Abdu'l-Bahá says, a newspaper must, in the first instance, be the means of harmony between the people. This is the prime duty of the proprietors of newspapers, to obliterate misunderstandings betwixt religions and race.
That's the exact opposite of what they're doing. That's the exact opposite of what they're doing, is it not? They are driving division because it's clickbait. They're throwing red meat to these people, blue meat to these people, anti-science meat to these people, pro-science meat to those people, to try to stir up the tribes. And this division, this polarization, allows them to continue their work of darkness unencumbered.
It's really something. Abdu'l-Bahá says, journalists must write significant articles that shall foster the public welfare. If they do so, they will be the first agents for the development of the community. Abdu'l-Bahá goes on to say, we may ascertain the progress or retrogression of a nation by its journalism.
Wow. Could you read that again?
Yeah.
That's where that bears repeating.
Yeah. we may ascertain the progress or retrogression of a nation by its journalism.
So you've mentioned several names. I would mention Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi has a Substack. I started reading his articles way back before, probably under Bush Jr. And then, during the first Trump election cycle, he was rabidly anti-Republican, rabidly anti-Trump. His articles were juicy and engaging. He talked about the economic meltdown, Goldman Sachs, his famous quote about Goldman Sachs being a vampire squid with its tentacles wrapped around the face of humanity, frantically jabbing its blood funnel into anything that smelled like money. I mean, he was a brilliant journalist to sort of highlight things that way. But then he began to see other sides of things, and today he's more independent. He's written, so the one reason is I trust him because I've seen his evolution of his own discovery of what's actually real and what's actually true. So he's one journalist. I mean, you have to take him with a grain of salt, but I mean, that's just one example of people that are out there where you can go get information that is looking at this from multiple sides.
Yeah, I think he's terrific. Matt Taibbi, Michael Schellenberger is another one that I really like. Glenn Greenwald, Cheryl Atkinson. There's a bunch more that I'd love to mention. I think it's vital for people to go and look at independent sources, independent journalists, because the big news organizations, they're either funded through corporate money, or government money, government subsidy, or government pressure is another influence. And
by the way, we're also having some of those on this show. We've got David French coming up. He's an opinion columnist for the New York Times. So we also love those outlets, but you have to take all of these different viewpoints with a grain of salt, because that's the beauty about journalism. And I'll throw out a quote there: only in the clash of differing opinions will the shining spark of truth emerge, or can the shining. That's Abdu'l-Bahá also. He wants there to be opposing viewpoints. He says newspapers must promote unity, but the process towards unity does involve people with different opinions coming together to talk. And, we've just seen that recently, where one gentleman who was going out and doing this on universities has tragically lost his life recently. But he was doing exactly what Abdu'l-Bahá said to do, which was to foster a clash of opinions in a respectful environment in which the shining spark of truth can emerge. And Abdu'l-Bahá says only. Without that, we will never get there. So we have to allow the clash of opinions, the clash of ideas. Everyone must feel free to fully and frankly express their opinion and set forth their argument. That's another quote by Abdu'l-Bahá. So we need this robust discussion, but the purpose is unity, not division. And for the news media, the purpose is division because it makes them money, sadly.
And there are significant initiatives taking place in places like California, in places like the United Kingdom, the European Union, that are trying to really restrict speech, and they're trying to penalize it, criminalize it. And this is a very alarming trend, this trend towards totalitarian kind of control of free speech. It's really important for people to be aware of that. And
again, I want to emphasize, this is not a recent phenomenon with the current president. This has been going on for decades. I think, frankly, we're hearing more about it now because many of the power structures that have been in place and have been funded and have been set in place supported the opponents of the current administration. And now they're getting very loud and vocal about it to try to make us think that this is only now happening. And both sides do it.
That's right. I think it's really important for us to remember that, the average citizen like you or I does not necessarily think in the same way as a powerful interest that is trying to corner a market or, propagate its own kind of way for its own interests. I'm thinking there was in 1961, there was an assassination of the United Nations Secretary General. His name was Dag Hammarskjöld. And this fellow was a very interesting guy who was really trying to bring peace. He was really into kind of national sovereign control and empowerment rather than, let's say, an outside colonial power bringing multinational corporations to, take over the resources of African countries. And he was, his plane went down in 1961, I think in Zambia, when he was on his way to Congo to try to negotiate a ceasefire. And it's interesting to me that, the Harry Truman, who at that time in 61 was the former US president, he was quoted in the newspaper the next day. And he said that Dag Hammarskjöld was on the point of getting something done when they killed him. Notice that I said, when they killed him. In other words, Truman quotes himself to the journalists in the article to make sure they understand his perspective, that this was not an accident. And, there have been a lot of very controversial assassinations around the world. And in the United States, I think constantly about JFK, Malcolm X, MLK Jr., RFK, John Lennon, all kinds of people. And now with this Charlie Kirk. And it's really important for us to remember that we must remain unified and we must not let things divide us, because especially now in the last 10 years with this social media and the kind of influence that it's had, I think people fight very easily. They take sides very easily.
Well, in that context, I just want to point out there may be some in the audience here who have already been infected by opinions, very negative opinions about who he was without actually listening to him, getting the full context of how he approached things. I will say I did watch the memorial service, and his widow, Erica, who's now the CEO of that organization, publicly prayed in tears for the forgiveness of his murderer. So she called for forgiveness. She said that she personally forgives him for what he did. So even while she says that, he is a martyr and his blood, in essence, she's saying is watering the movement, and more people are turning to God as a result of it and bringing God back into public life in universities and bringing a moral fiber, including the principle of forgiveness and love. And every word she spoke emphasized that. So I would encourage those who may have formed opinions based on the most negative. And we're running out of time, but there are two biases that this media plays to. One is the negativity bias. People like to hear the most negative thing. Another one is the most sensational thing, right? So that's what they play to in the algorithms. But if you actually take the time to listen, no, she spoke about forgiveness and love and transcendence and spirituality and love of God and God's grace for all people, and to try to unify and bring people together.
Is a tremendous example.
So Mehrtash, we are out of time. What words do you want to leave our audience with today?
Well, remember to maintain a posture of neutrality in everything you do. Partisanship, I think, is really hurting our country, and I think we need to be unified and be skeptical. Whatever claims that are you feel are being foisted on you by the 24-hour news cycle, by let's say popular culture trends or social media trends that seem to be spontaneous, keep it at arm's length. Give yourself time to think about it, And you don't necessarily have to declare an opinion on something. Remember to stay unified with people.
Thank you. And for everyone else, remember, you are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. That's it for today. Stay tuned for the sneak peek of who will be coming to talk to you on Created in the Image of God next week at 7 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Eastern on Sunday morning with Created in the Image of God. Hey everyone, Wade Franson here with a sneak peek for our next show this coming Sunday with a returning guest, Joseph Appman, who has a PhD in the philosophy of religion, who has issued the first in his trilogy, A Philosophical War, which is being republished and redistributed. And he's also the founder of Middle Tree, and will be working with Soup Media and Planksip after the acquisition of Planksip. Welcome to the studio, Joe.
Thank you, Wade. Thank you for having me. Thank you for believing in what I do, and thank you for finding my work a home with Something or Other Publishing. So I'm really excited to be here and excited to be with you all officially. So,
well, it's not just at home here with Something or Other, but also with Created in the Image of God, right? Because you use the Genesis story as the launching pad for your philosophical war treatise. Why was that?
yeah, and I'm not a biblical scholar by any stretch of the imagination. However, everyone knows that foundational story in the West of Genesis and of the Garden of Eden. And so I wanted to take knowledge that everybody is aware of and a story that everyone has some familiarity with, regardless of your religious background or upbringing, and use that as a jumping off point to talk about this larger philosophical issue that I diverge into and talk about a number of different things from that origination point, but that's really that jumping off point because of the universal familiarity with it.
Well, and I just, we're always learning something new about the book of Genesis. I just interviewed a scholar from Israel who told me that the Hebrew of those two trees could be rendered, the tree of life being the tree of experience, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil being rendered the tree of judgment. But of course, it is about discovery and learning and discerning, and there's also judgment involved, right? So this is fascinating, and I reference your work all the time because it is so foundational in philosophical terms, in theoretical terms, but also in a rubber meets the road. So I want to just quickly bring in your work with Middle Tree, which is an educational organization that seeks to redefine, I think, I mean, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but redefine how education takes place and our approach to learning, right? And I just learned from you that this isn't just for a certain age group in elementary or junior high, but it's soon as anyone learns to, as long as people want to keep learning. So how does all this fit together with your next move, which is to now publish this trilogy, take half a step back from Middle Tree and focus more on introducing these ideas into the mainstream?
Yeah, it's funny because I had my whole academic career been preparing for a career, well, in higher academia, right? As a college professor. That was, when you're going to school, especially for philosophy, religion, and theology, like, that's what you're going to do with your life.
There's nowhere else to apply it, right? The only application
exactly.
is in school, right?
Yeah.
But you found another way.
Right. No. So I did, but it was quite by accident. And it's been a really interesting journey because it's given me this very different perspective, given the background that I have. And yet here we were thrust into working with, and especially when we first started, we were primarily working with elementary, middle, and high school students. And that's now expanded, as you mentioned, to anyone who can do anything academically, from preschool to adults. So it's given me a unique perspective, given the work that I had done in academia before starting Middle Tree, and then with the work that I had done at Middle Tree, it kind of informed the academic and the philosophical work that I was still working on, and it shows up greatly in a philosophical war in a number of different ways that we'll get into.
Well, and that's all we have time for today, but we will be getting into all this, as I mentioned, on a regular basis as we move down this path. So you're going to want to tune in at 7 a.m. Central Time to Create in the Image of God this coming Sunday and hear the full hour of unpacking all the layers of this onion that Joe and I will be talking about. We'll see you there.